the Lewisburg Primary Purpose Big Book Study Group 4-step workshop. And before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about why we do a 4-step. Because, you know, we alcoholics, we're not like everybody else in the world. So, you know, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I got here with a whole lot of emotional baggage. So, you know, this emotional baggage is not what makes me an alcoholic, but it is certainly has a lot to do with some of the reasons that I drink, because I drink at stuff. And so I got a couple of things in here I want to share with you and show you. And then Trish and I will get started with the slideshow. My name's Jamie, by the way. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. So one of the reasons that we do a 4-step is to help us with that old emotional baggage, right? Because we're resentful about everything. We're resentful about the way we've been raised and the old hurts and old pains that we've had all throughout our lives and everything that we've gone through. And let's face it, sometimes we've had some pretty ugly people in our lives. So I've got about 14 relationships in this bag. Some of them are childhood parents and stuff. Some of them are ex-marriages and so on and so forth. And I've been just dragging this stuff through life again and again and again. So, you know, I'm gonna go to relationships. You know, there was that girl that I loved so much, and she was my first love, and she just gave me that first gift and that first picture. And, you know, I've kept it forever, and I just couldn't get rid of it. And then I'm in a relationship with you today, but you know what? I've still got a picture of her, and I keep it. And, you know, every now and then when I'm in a fight with you, I start thinking about how good it was with her. And so I get it out, and I take a look at it. I kiss it, and you know, I start romancing things that are no longer a part of my life, and I forget about how sick that they might have been. And it's what I'm trying to look at all the sickness in life. You know, one of the things that we do in relationships as we go through life. Everybody's tried to put us in a box. Our parents have tried to put us in a box. Our grandparents, you know, we've tried to put others in a box to try and fit what we think they should be or what they think we should be. And, you know, what happens when we get here is we've got a box full of garbage, or we've got a box full that's really got us an empty soul. So, you know, which leads to the emotional baggage. And then what happens in relationships, you know, I don't know about y'all, but me, most of my relationships didn't start off because, well, let's put it this way, they didn't start off in the right way. There was generally some sort of attraction, it was generally some sort of sexual attraction, and that's what started the ball rolling. It wasn't because we were laughing and having fun and all of that. Maybe we met in a bar and we went home, and you know, 5 years later, one of us is the thing that never left. And as we went through that, there's a lot of hurt and pain. So most of those relationships, you know, end up starting off romantically or sexually, and when that starts to wane and fall away, well, then we start doing things like getting inappropriate magazines to fill that void, because all of a sudden she doesn't love me anymore, right? So I start looking at things to try and fill that hole that's going on inside it in the relationship. And then, of course, a few years ago, what did we have? We entered the age of technology and cell phones. And so now there's people I can find, and there's websites that I can go to, and I can find girls to talk to or boys to talk to, right? And I could talk to them about stuff that I shouldn't talk to them about, probably in life in general, but especially while I'm not in a relationship with somebody else. And of course, I'm drinking a lot too, and my alcoholism is fueling all of this stuff, and it's just making it worse and worse. So let's not talk about the elephant in the room, which is my alcoholism, right? Because when we talk about my alcoholism and how my drinking is getting, I just get angry and I don't want to hear about it. My drinking isn't a problem, and you're the problem. And so we start fussing and fighting about it, and then I start becoming that psychopath that it talks about in the doctor's opinion, where I'm feeling guilty and over remorseful and everything, and I make resolutions, but I never make a decision. So we just never address it, and then maybe as we go along in the relationship, things start to escalate a little bit, and some anger starts coming into our relationship, and we're not punching each other or anything like that, but you really happen to collect porcelain dolls, and in my anger I pick one up and I throw it across the room, and gee, poor little fella lost his head. Amazingly enough, I was going through a box tonight, and I found the little guy's head, I think. No, must be from another one that I broke. Imagine that. This head won't fit. But the point being is that through my alcoholism, things are escalating, and through all of this, I'm getting more and more angry and resentful. And as we go through this relationship, or I go through more and more relationships, my favorite t-shirt, I refer to this t-shirt as the shirt with the hole in the sole. And, today I wear this shirt like this because it fits and it's comfortable, and I'm happy in it because it's what's familiar to me, and it's where I take my refuge. And when I'm feeling in that depression and fear and anxiety because things aren't going well in my life, then, and my drinking is still at the root of all of it, then I break out the old smelly blanket and I wrap myself up in the old smelly blanket, because it becomes that place where I'm safe. I'm safe against anybody who's trying to bring me any harm or do me any harm. The problem is that I don't see that I'm the one who is volunteering for so much of the harm that's going on in my life. So this old emotional baggage is what we're trying to address through the process of step 4. And it's what we're trying to get rid of and heal from. So that's what our 4-step workshop is all about, is how to address that old emotional baggage, how to not only overcome the resentments, but how to take a complete look at ourselves and how to heal from all of that emotional pain. So that being said, I hope you will enjoy what we have to present to you. We've got a 60-some slideshow in PowerPoint. And I forgot to start my recorder, Trish, so I hope you started yours.
I did.
Okay, good. I'll start mine late anyway. Everything that we do tonight is right out of the big book, but because we're so visual, we have it in a slideshow. I hope it'll be helpful. It's helpful if you have a notepad and a pen, and there will be some numbers on the slides. When we're done showing it to you, we're happy to go back to any slides that you have questions on for clarification. We want to get through the whole thing, and we're happy to go back. Last thing I want to say, whether you're needing to do a 4-step or whether you sponsor somebody and are taking them through the work, this is always good resource to use in being able to help somebody. So I hope you will enjoy what we have to offer. And you are up, Trish. And thank you all for being here.
Okie dokie.
Yes, Trish, please. And if there happen to be any others.
Okay, but before we get started, we have a birthday girl in the room. So celebrating 5 months today. Congratulations, Kathy.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
You are
I'm really
welcome.
happy about it. Thank you, guys.
You are welcome. Is there anybody else celebrating a milestone this week? No takers? Okay.
So now we'll get started. So welcome to the Lewisburg Primary Purpose Big Book Study 4th Step Workshop. And you can find audio recordings of past workshops on our website, along with our Tuesday night Big Book Study and a whole bunch of speakers, some history on AA, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's all on our website, LPPBBSGAA.org.
By the way, folks, you can feel free to screenshot any of these screens that you like. Hold your camera up, take a picture of any screens that you need to take pictures of. We don't mind that at all. And let's open this up with our set-aside prayer, please. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, the big books, the meetings, my disease. But most especially, God, please set aside everything I think I know about you, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please let me see the truth.
And our preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Oh, please keep in mind that this is a workshop. We will be discussing some real-life examples of what could be difficult things for some. While questions are encouraged for clarification, we do not expect specific discussions to encroach on topics that should be saved for your sponsor or for a one-on-one conversation. Feel free to take notes as we go along. The workshop should not be used as a platform for sharing your 5th step.
And as Jamie mentioned, please use your notebook to write down the slide number from the lower right-hand corner of each slide. That way we can take all questions at the end, but we'll still have the slide number to refer back to for any clarification or further understanding.
And before we get to the actual 4th step, we want to lead you into a couple of things, make sure we have a solid foundation. So we take a look at our triangle of Alcoholics Anonymous first, which is recovery. The recovery is the bottom and the foundation of the triangle, which also represents the mind, found in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page XXV to page 164, set of 12 spiritual principles that are the 12 steps. Have you continued to actively take the 12-step process outlined in the Big Book? And then the traditions, which is the unity in body, found in the fellowship, set of 12 spiritual principles found in the traditions. Do you have a group that you are committed to? Is your group committed to the 12 steps and 12 traditions? And then our concepts, the service and the spirit found in carrying the message, a set of 12 spiritual principles found in the 12 concepts. Are you working with others and taking them through the 12 steps? So we have 36 spiritual principles that we can live by in Alcoholics Anonymous.
So while this is a 4th step workshop, it's always good practice to review the foundation of steps 1, 2, and 3 before beginning. Therefore, we'll be reviewing some hotspots to make sure the foundation is intact leading into step 4.
Through the information we read in the doctor's opinion, along with the first 44 pages, we are given the information we need to self-diagnose our alcoholism. Only 51 pages in all lead us to this decision. This is our step 1.
And step 1 from our book Alcoholics Anonymous, page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step of recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed.
And somehow we got twisted in out of sync again. Being convinced from page 60. And we're going to take a look at the ABCs in a little bit different way. Am I convinced? A, am I convinced that I'm an alcoholic and that my life is unmanageable? Step 1. B, am I convinced that no human power could have relieved my alcoholism? Still step 1. And C, am I convinced that there is a power greater than my own power that will relieve my problem? A and B, step 2.
And referring to the chapter We Agnostics, pages 50 and 51. And keep in mind, this chapter is a pathway for letting go of our old ideas and our old beliefs. And it helps open my heart and mind to finding new beliefs and a new pathway. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them.
And then we're going to take a look at pages 60 through 62. Life based upon self-will, and we read this in the first person. If my arrangements would only stay put, if people would only do as I wish, the show would be great. Everybody, including me, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, I may be sometimes quite virtuous. I may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, I may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, I am more likely to have varied traits.
What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. I begin to think life doesn't treat me right. I decide to exert myself more. I become, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit me. Admitting I might be somewhat at fault, I am sure that other people are more to blame. I become angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is my basic trouble? Am I not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Am I not a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I manage well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are things I want? And do not my actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Am I not, even in my best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony?
I am self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. I am like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining about the sad state of the nation. I'm like the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. I am like politicians and reformers who are sure that all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. I am like the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. I am like the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever my protestations, am I not mostly concerned with myself, my resentments, or my self-pity? Selfishness and self-centeredness, that I think is the root of my troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me, seemingly without provocation, but invariably I find it sometime in the past I have made decisions based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt.
So my troubles, I think, are basically of my own making. They arise out of myself, and I am an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I usually don't think so. Above everything, I must be rid of this selfishness. I must, or it kills me. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. I've had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I could not live up to them, even though I would have liked to. Neither could I reduce my self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on my own power. I had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First of all, I had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, I decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be my director. He is the principal, I am his agent. He is the father, and I am his child. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which I will pass to freedom.
Now that the book has given us ideas that our problem is based in self, we need a pathway towards finding out what our selfishness, self-centeredness, and fears and delusions are. This comes from the process of the 4-step inventory. The first 3 columns are centered around our resentments and how they affected us. Everything after looks at our own thoughts, actions, and patterns. This is the discovery process of who we have become.
So, first of all, I had to quit playing God. And why? It didn't work.
And as we come to our 3rd step prayer, before we go into this prayer, folks, as we go to this prayer, I would ask you to think about all of the stuff that we just read from page 60 through 62 of the writer, the actor, the director, the selfishness, the self-centeredness, the fear, the delusion. Could it be possible that through this prayer, that is some of the stuff, the foundational stuff that we are asking God to relieve us from and help us with in this process? Our 3rd step prayer from page 63. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Don't move on yet, Trish. Notice that there is no amen at the end of this prayer. The amen will come at the end of the 7th step prayer, completing the process that we are beginning with this prayer. This prayer right here starts the cycle of the next 5 steps. In step 3, I'm asked to make a decision to turn my will and my life, which I don't really know how to do that, over to the care of God, which I'm not really sure what that really is. So the process of steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 teach me exactly how to do that. And while God gave me free will, He can't take any action in my life without an invitation. This is the invitation to God to come into my life, to be in partnership with me, to help me overcome these difficulties.
So the three aspects of a relationship with God from page 62. The first, the director and the actor. A director runs the show. The actor listens for direction. On my own, have I failed to provide what I need to be okay? Am I ready to make the decision that hereafter God will direct my life? The principal and the agent. An agent represents who the principal or employer would have them be. Have I failed to be the person I would have them be, or I would have me be? And have I failed to make others who I need them to be? Am I ready to make the decision that hereafter I will represent who God would have me be? And third, father and child. A child trusts their father can provide what they are incapable of doing on their own. Have I failed in directing my life on my own power? And am I ready to make the decision that hereafter I will trust that God will provide what I need?
And there's a lot of 4-step workbooks out there put out by a lot of people, Hazelton and many others. But this is the actual 4-step workbook, folks. Pad and a pencil, or pad and pen. The 4-step was never meant to be a check the box kind of inventory. It was always meant to be written. And if we have a 4-step workbook where, yeah, that fits me, that fits me, that fits me, and we're just going down checking the box, then what we're missing out in the part of truly looking at it, writing it down in our own words of who we are and who we have become. Go ahead, Trish.
Before I begin, I'm going to pray something like this. God, please help me see the truth about the things in myself which are blocking me from you.
So we're going to take a look at page 65 here. 65 in the big book shows 3 columns. We're only going to present 2 columns to you right at the moment. And we start with our resentment list. The first 2 columns, we work each column from top to bottom. We list each name, and then we list each cause. So let's start with the names first and go through whoever it is. In some cases, if you don't know where to start, maybe it's that you start with family, or maybe it's that you start with relationships. A lot of people don't know where to start. I always like to recommend, who are you the maddest at most right now? Who are you the most upset with? Because then you can always work anywhere throughout the inventory process through there. And then we go to the cause after we have our names down. And the example that Bill gives us in the book is, so we have the name, Mr. Brown. What's the cause? His attention to my wife. He told my wife of my mistress, Brown may get my job. Then Mrs. Jones. She's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend. She's a gossip. Then my employer. Employer's unreasonable, unjust, and overbearing. Threatens to fire me for drinking and padding my expense account. And my wife, of course. She misunderstands and nags me, and she likes Brown, too. Wants the house put in her name. And we are going to, besides Bill's hypotheticals that he puts in to use for examples. We're going to come in with a real life inventory that we have completely worked through as an example later as well.
So after we've completed the first two columns, who I'm resentful at and what the cause is, I'm going to add in my third column. Again, that's after I've done the first two columns, working each of them top to bottom. And the third column is the 7 areas of self, which begin on page 64. And those are self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. So looking at Mr. Brown, I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. I have the 3 different reasons, the 3 causes, the 3 resentments. And what do they affect? They affect my sex relations, and they affect my self-esteem, and then the word fear in parentheses. Mrs. Jones, 3 different resentments against her, 3 causes. What does that affect? That affects my personal relationship, and also that affects my self-esteem, and there's that word fear again in parentheses. I'm resentful at my employer. 2 different causes or 2 resentments there. That affects my self-esteem and fear and my security. And I'm resentful at my wife. 3 different resentments or 3 different causes there. That affects my pride, my personal relations, my security, and fear. And we'll look at the fears later on when we come to the fear inventory.
All 3 of those columns are lies.
But those are my feelings.
And feelings aren't facts.
Feelings aren't facts, but feelings are valid. And we need to find out where they come from and then decide what we're going to do with them.
While there are people who will look at the chart on page 65 and say, this is my 4th step, there is more work to do. The full directions start on page 65 and end on page 71. Page 72 states, we have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and discovered the obstacles in our path. Without these other columns, I am missing most of my discovery process. The following slides are the rest of the process.
Before each 4th column, and the book talks about that on page 66 and 67, consider in paragraph form, how have I done the things I've resented in column 2 to the person that I've listed in column 1 or others? Or in other words, I'm mad at them because they did this, but how often have I done this same thing back to them or somebody else? And then I referenced page 66, paragraph 4. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, just like ourselves. And after considering this realization, we say the 4th step prayer from page 67. This is a sick person like myself. How can I be helpful to them? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. I cannot be helpful to someone if I am angry. If I'm still stuck in that anger, I am not willing to be helpful to them. So something to consider is trying to be helpful and looking for a way to be helpful to them to get past that anger. Is this not the beginning of forgiveness?
Well done, Trish.
Thank you. I took your spot.
You did, and you did well. So this is basically what it looks like on paper, folks, and we actually have worksheets that are printable. If you'll put your email addresses in the chat, we will be happy to email these sheets out to you, and you can print them at will, as many as you like. At the top of every page, we write, God, please let me see the truth about myself and whom I'm resentful at. And we've already taken that part of the work out for you You'll just have to fill in your part. This is what the first column from page 65 should look like when it's completed. And these are the individual resentments. Notice if there are multiple resentments per person. So we have Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employers. In this case, with Mr. Brown, there were 3 individual resentments. With Mrs. Jones, there were 3 individual resentments. With the employer, 2 individual resentments. And the reason that we break that up, folks, like that is because what happens is we just say, oh, it's resentment, oh, it's resentment. What we have is we have all of these little resentments piled up together. And it's kind of like when you make spaghetti in the pot and you take and you dump the water out and you just leave it all in the pot and don't do anything with it, and it's all stuck together, right? So what we're doing by doing this is we're just taking the individual noodles and pulling them apart as resentment so we can look at them individually one by one. Because when we take a look at each individual resentment, what will happen is it becomes easier to let go of single things than it does a great big pile of stuff all at once. And that's why we do it this way.
And the worksheets or the workbook that Jamie referred to. On the left is the page that we just showed you. On the right is what our page would look like. Prayer on the top to say or to write over, whichever is easier for you. And then the spaces for you to fill in. It's not a check off the box, it's a fill in the blank. So I'm still doing my own writing. I'm not just checking off what somebody else put in a format, and I can say, well, this is me and this is me, but I haven't really done any work to determine how is that me.
So the 7 areas of self, and this is our 3rd column, right out of the book. The 3rd column focuses on the 7 areas of self. These are found on pages 64 and 65 in the big book. Our focus will be on self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, and pocketbook. I ask myself, how do my resentments affect me in these areas of my life? Keep in mind, sex relations has nothing to do with the act of sex here. Rather, the focus on male-female or same-sex relationships. And while pride is not listed on these pages, it is included in the 7 deadlies of sins, which is discussed in the 12 and 12, step 4, page 48. It also ties very closely with self-esteem and gives me a different perspective in looking at myself. The 7 deadly sins are pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. And the reason that we added pride to this is because it is such a mirror image and so closely tied with self-esteem.
So this is an example of the column 3 done using the 7 areas of self and how it would look in our forms once it's completed. At the top of every page, I'm going to write, God, please let me see the truth, or I'm going to read that, pray that, write over it, something so that I'm inviting God into the process. And then in the upper right-hand corner, it has the first name, Mr. Brown, and the first resentment, his attention to my wife. We're going to use 1 page for each example, or 1 page per resentment. And like Jamie was saying, that's how we can go ahead and separate out each resentment individually, rather than trying to look at the entire ball of resentments and not knowing where one ends and one starts. So in looking at the resentment that Mr. Brown has and his attention, or the resentment against Mr. Brown and his attention to my wife, I'm going to keep columns 1 and 2 in mind while writing the third column, and that comes directly from page 65, paragraph 3. Reconsider it carefully. I'm going to look at the third column and consider the opposite of each sentence to let the inventory reveal my fears behind each of the 7 areas of self. So the self-esteem, the directions there, or the definition, is how do I see myself, or how do I feel about myself? What's the role I've assigned myself in this relationship? And I'm going to start sentences with I am. For example, I'm the best husband she could have. Or, I'm the worst breadwinner there could be. And then I'm going to look at that, both sides of it. Then we're going to look at each sentence and the opposite and come up with what are the fears surrounding the self-esteem here. Could be the fear of not being good enough. The fear of Mr. Brown's going to steal my wife. Could be the fear of I'm going to be alone. And then moving on to pride. How I think others see me, or how I think others feel about me, or the role that I have assigned myself in other people's lives. And I'm going to start sentences with others should or others should not. For example, others should not pay so much attention to my wife. And what's the fears there? The fear of being alone, the fear of abandonment.
And then we move on down the list in the 7 areas of self to ambition. What do I want to happen here? Sentences start with, here's the example. I want a healthy, happy relationship. Or, I want to be left alone, damn it. And then we take a look at any fears that might be associated with that. Maybe it's being smothered in a relationship, or maybe it's that I'm involved in a sick relationship and it's narcissistic and everything that happens between us is just sick and unhealthy and degrading and demeaning. So we need to take a look at those things. Security, what do I need to be okay here? The example with that is I need my wife to love and respect me. I need Brown to respect my marriage. So what are the fears associated with that? Being disrespected, maybe being unlovable. It's your list. You have to find out what those fears are for yourself. That's why it's not a check the box kind of thing. Personal relationships. My deep-seated beliefs. How this relationship is supposed to look like. Example, wives should trust their husbands. Friends should respect me, my marriage, my family. And we identified the fears there. Not being accepted, not people not respecting my wife and treating her like a lady, or maybe flirting with her or something like that. That's a bit disrespectful. Sex relations. My deep-seated belief of how real men and or women are supposed to be. And the example there is real men don't pursue another man's wife. What's one of the fears associated with that? Fear of abandonment. I want to touch on this for just a second. Where do most of us get our ideas of what relationships are supposed to look like? Don't we get it from childhood, and we get that from mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa, or aunts and uncles? There's generally somebody, and I know some of us have come from broken homes and stuff, but somewhere in our history, there's been somebody who's been a role model, whether it's been a good role model or a bad role model, that we got our first impressions of how relationships are supposed to look in our lives. And we've carried that with us from relationship to relationship to relationship. And maybe we've just had some bad role models as we've gone through it. So we take a look at all of that. And pocketbook affects my finances. And sentences start with no one can, should, or shouldn't. It has variables. These are just examples, folks. Here's an example. Others should not go into my wallet without my permission. No one should go into my phone without my permission. Brown should not ask my wife out to dinner and then ask her to pay for it. What's the fear associated with that? Financial insecurity. Let me give you an example. I've been married 3 times, and any of my wives who said, grab that out of my purse for me, I never grabbed anything out of my purse or out of their purse for them. I always handed them their purses. What's in their purse, in my experience, has always been their business. So I've always given that to them. Not that they have anything to hide or anything. It's just a matter of trust. The reason we put phones here is because, we go snooping to see who's texting or what. But here's the thing. A lot of us in today's world, with today's technology, we pay our bills with our phone. We have apps and things where we do business. And somebody gets into our phone, it's easy for them to start hijacking our life and maybe Venmo themselves some money from our bank account or something like that. So this is why people shouldn't do that, and it just becomes a financial security pocketbook issue, and that's kind of the way that we look at it. Technology, as wonderful as it is, also has its drawbacks, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're protected.
So again, we're taking a quick look at what we just showed you on the yellow sheet, and then the white page on the right. A big part of that is just to save your ink and your printing. We took out the yellow background, but that's what it'll look like if we email you the copy of it. If you want a copy of our documents, just put your email into the chat and we can get that emailed out to you afterwards. But it's a fill in the blank here. This affects my self-esteem. How does it affect my self-esteem? And a column on the side for the fears. This affects my pride. How does it affect my pride? And then the fears, and then all the way down on a second page gives the other 5 areas of self.
You could say, we give you the prompt and you fill in your story if you like. 4th column worksheet. Boy, I know a whole bunch of people that say, I don't need a 4th column. I recently heard a guy say in a meeting, my sponsor figured out my 4th column for me. And, I got to reading the book, and it doesn't talk about anything about sponsorship or who we're doing this work with until we get into the chapter Into Action. This is all work that I'm supposed to do myself. So our 4th column worksheet. This is where I discover my defects of character and shortcomings. The directions are found on page 67, paragraph 2 in the big book. Use 1 page per individual. Resolutely look for the harms that I have done to others. List where I am to blame. This will be the foundation for my 8-step list. This form may need to be modified for institutions. Some of us have had difficulty with institutions. And I continue to recognize my fear. The directions for the fear inventory is found on page 68. So we are always directed to go back, pen to paper, and continue to do more writing.
So here's what the beginning of our 4th column worksheet looks like. And this is an example of it, of how it should look when it's completed. And keep in mind, this can be done in phrases. We're not writing the great American novel. It's not a school essay that I have to hand in. Short sentences, phrases work because then when I take it to my sponsor, I just need enough information there that'll remind me what it is that I need to talk about. And I don't need to write my entire life story, just bullet points works. So the realization in this fourth column is, how have I done the things that I've resented in column 2 to the person that I listed in column 1 or others? And that comes directly from page 66. So the first thing I'm going to look at, where had I been self-seeking? Look around the whole resentment. What did I do? Where was I to blame? These are my actions, my selfish actions. So what were my selfish actions and activities within this relationship? Who did I affect, and who else did I pull into this drama? And when we talk about pulling someone else into the drama, if I'm mad at you and I go and call up my sister and say, do you know what they did to me? Do you know what she did? Do you know what... my sister has nothing to do with this. But I'm pulling her into the drama just so that she can sit and pat me on the head and say, oh, poor baby, of course they've done you wrong. Without being there to say, yeah, but what did you do? What was your part in this? So who did I affect? What did I do? I placed blame. I acted out. I called your boss to tattle. He's not really sick. He's drunk. He's hungover. He's out getting laid somewhere. I said I was going out with my friends, but I was going out to get laid. I'm not being honest to you any more than you're being honest to me. Selfish. This is my thinking, my thoughts, and my actions. What was my selfish thinking while I was doing the above self-seeking actions? My selfish attitudes were, I demanded that I get my own way. I was filing divorce papers in my mind while we were in bed together. I had it all planned out, and you were going to pay. I was going to cut you off.
Anybody besides me ever think like that? Where had I been dishonest? What were the lies I was telling myself that resulted in my selfish thinking above? Where was I in delusion? I could find someone better. You would never be good enough. You didn't care about me and my family. Where had I been afraid? What are the fears that drive the delusions above? I was afraid. I was afraid I'd be alone, though I didn't want you. The children wouldn't have their other parent. I wouldn't be able to pay the bills, and I would be homeless. I feared for my own safety or retaliation. The above fears drive the dishonesty that result from the selfish attitude behind the self-seeking actions.
Next, I have to consider if there are any other fears that I need to include in my fear list or my fear inventory, and consider the opposite of each fear that I've already written down. And if it applies, I add it to the list. And don't just look for the negative fears, look for the positive ones as well. Because we're not just looking at our liabilities, we're looking at our assets, we're looking at the good and the bad and everything that there is about us. I fear being alone, or I fear meeting another abusive partner. I fear being homeless, but I also fear having to move back in with my parents. I fear losing my job for the lies that I told when I was out. I fear my truth. I fear being successful. I fear having too many friends. And then I look at the harms. Do I see the harms that I caused? And I need to look at around the entire resentment. Parents, friends, employers, those innocent bystanders who I dragged in who had nothing to do with the situation, but I just wanted to share the drama. I harmed my spouse and my children with my lies. I harmed my boss by not showing up for work and my coworkers who had to cover for me. I harmed my relationship with other family members. I have harmed my credit and financial status due to my selfish actions. I've harmed friendships by complaining about my spouse to them.
You know, this might seem like a lot, folks, but what does step 4 say? It says, a thorough, searching, and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And I believe that's what this does. The fear inventory. Read the big book from page 67, third paragraph. Notice the word fear. 2, page 68, third paragraph, outgrow fear. List all fears. Make a graph of columns or use the fear inventory template. We will focus on the first column. Then when we look at each row, then we will look at each row individually. Take all your fears you wrote in the inventory and make a single list in the column. List each column each different fear only once of the first column. Why do I have this fear? Look all around each fear. The next slide will show you how to follow the trail of fears by looking at the fears hidden behind each fear. We reviewed our reference page 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? Kind of spotlight, Trish. So, one of the things that we do with fear, folks, is we take the word fear and we use it like a blanket and we throw it out there like a blanket of fog, and we never define what the fears are, and we throw it over this and we throw it over here, and every problem that comes across in our life we blame fear on it, but we don't know what the root and the foundations of the fear are. So eventually what happens is we get back in the emotional pain of all of it, and we start living this terrified life. And without defining the root cause of the fears, we have no solution whatsoever. And eventually what will happen is I'll crawl back in bed and I'll pull that fear back up over my head, and I will live under that fear, and it will become a place of comfort, and I will become so terrified about the unknown that I won't be willing to crawl out of it, and I will crawl, and to reference a friend, back into the black hole. And that is not a comfortable place to live. So this fear inventory helps give me a pathway to recognize what the fears are, where they come from, what their foundation is, so that I can find a solution to overcoming them. Thank you, Trish. Clearly, we like visual analogies.
Just a little bit. So, you can take this slide because I get the next one.
Oh, yeah, you get the next couple, don't you? So here's an example of the trail of fears, of underlying fears. I fear not being good enough. If I'm not good enough, I fear I'll be unwanted. I fear being unwanted, and if I'm unwanted, I fear I'll be alone. I fear being alone because I fear the emotional pain of being alone. I fear sitting in the emotional pain. If I sit in the emotional pain long enough, I fear I'll drink again. I fear drinking. For me, to drink is to die. I fear dying because I fear the unknown. I don't know what dying really means. I fear the unknown because I fear there is no God. I fear there is no God, so I repeatedly trust self-reliance, even though I fear self-reliance fails me. But wasn't I trying to kill myself anyway? Is this alcoholic insanity? Is this how I should think the drink through? Am I setting myself up for a drink when I'm drowning in the fear?
So on this page, this is what our grid or our fear template is going to look like. And when we take it through the real life example, what we end up doing is we look at all the fears all the way through the very first page of resentment, all the way through up till now, and we list each one individually in that first column. And then once we have them written top to bottom, listing each fear only once, even if it's come up multiple times in the inventory, then I work across and I find out what is the fear underneath that and what is the fear underneath that. So taking that page Jamie just read, we're just putting it into a different format. So I fear being not good enough, and I fear that because I really fear I'm going to be unwanted. And if I fear I'm unwanted, I fear I'm going to be alone. And we'd follow that all the way out to the fear that there is no God. I'm not going to read them all because Jamie just did on the page before. This is just one example of of following the trail of fears. Each one of us will need to follow the trail in ourselves to identify our own fears. And in our example on our slide 50, we're going to look at some repeated fears. And that's just one other pattern that we can find in our inventory.
Ah, yeah, one of my favorite pages. Now let's talk about sex. Our sex inventory and sex ideal from Alcoholics Anonymous, pages 68 and 69. Now about sex. Many needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on the question. It is so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes. Absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cries that sex is a lower lust, that is a lust of our lower nature and a basic necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not wish to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish? These are questions. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it.
The following is the directions for the sex inventory in question form, taken right out of the book. The pages that Jamie just read. And we always ask God, just like on the other pages, to show us what we need to see and to show us what's blocking us from our relationship with God. So step 1, we're going to read the big book from page 68, the 4th paragraph, now about sex, to page 70, the 2nd paragraph, would bring heartache. And then I'm going to pray, and I'm going to make a list of the relationships in my life. And then number 3, determine what can be done. I'm going to write a brief history, a short paragraph, of each relationship, including the motives for getting involved, specific sex conduct, major points in the relationship, and how the relationship ended, or how it is now.
I review my conduct and look at each relationship answering the following questions. Where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been inconsiderate? Whom did I hurt? including those we brought into our drama, including the innocent bystanders? Did I arouse jealousy? Did I arouse bitterness? Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? The answer to the last question is never, I shouldn't have gotten involved, because I can't change the past. I did get involved, and this has now become an experience of my life. Refer instead to what should I have done or how should I have behaved in the relationship. Make sure to be especially complete in this answer, since it will later be used in writing my sex ideal.
And now, when it comes to writing my sex ideal, page 69 through 70. In this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideas and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we had done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
Suppose we fall short of our chosen ideal and stumble. Does that mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but that is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are the facts of our experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. The reading continues through to the end of the chapter on page 71, encouraging us to review our work and then to move forward towards amends. This also encourages us to continue to align ourselves with God so that He can remove whatever self-will has blocked me off from Him.
So, now the following slides are a real working example of a fourth step inventory. It follows the first person in column 1, all the way from the first resentment through all 4 columns, discovery along the trail of fears, and ending with the sex inventory and sex ideal. This takes us through the entire inventory process, starting on page 65 to the end of page 71, and completes step 4 on this one resentment.
There's a reason that we felt it was important to bring in a real live resentment that had been worked through to show you, because this way it is not a hypothetical example that the writers of the book were using. This is something that has actually been worked through in real life, and it might make it more relatable to your own personal situation in life, and that's why we've done this. So, here again, top of the page, God, please let me see the truth about who I am resentful about. This is what our first and second column are going to look like. Resentful at Dad. The cause. He abandoned our family and left us with nothing and nowhere to go. We use the following page to continue one page per resentment. So if you got 7 resentments against a person, it's going to be 7 individual pages. There again, pulling those noodles out so that you can let go of each resentment individually so that they're not all bundled up in one great big heap.
So, looking at the third column and the 7 areas of fact, 7 areas of self, and up in the upper left-hand corner, these are self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relations, sex relations, pocketbook from page 64. And on the top of the page, God, let me see the truth. And I'll pray that, write over it, somehow invite God into the process. I'm resentful at my father. I'm resentful at him because he abandoned our family and left us with nothing and nowhere to go. This affects my self-esteem. I'm not good enough for him to stick around. He loved my brother more. And the fears related to that, not being good enough, being alone, fear of abandonment. This affects my pride. No father should be angry or violent to a 3-year-old. Fathers shouldn't leave their sons. And the fears there, anger, violence, being unlovable, being abandoned.
Quick comment here. So, here again, we've done all the printing on the pages, but you can see, obviously, there's handwriting in here. This is the way the worksheets come to you, so you can do the writing necessary for you. When we send out the worksheets, there's, I think, 13 example pages, so you have example pages to go back to. You can always call Trish or I if you need help walking through it, and then you can print as many of these pages as you need to go through this. So, still in the 7 areas of self, this affects my ambition. I want my dad back. I want to be loved by my dad. I want my dad to be my role model. The fear associated with that. Abandonment, not having a role model, not having a strong father presence in my life. This affects my security. I need to feel safe to be okay. I need to feel loved to be okay. I need to have shelter and food to be okay. The fears associated with that, homelessness, hunger, being hurt, alone, emotional pain, and being unlovable. This affects my sex relationships. Real men don't leave their families. Real men support their families. Real men don't bring strange people into their homes to have sex with their families and then leave to have sex someplace else. And yes, in some of our lives, folks, that does happen. I'm sorry that's uncomfortable, but we are looking for the truth in our lives. What's the fear about that? The fear of abandonment, maybe sexual abuse, maybe even molestation. Not being safe, fear of not knowing what a healthy relationship really is. This affects my pocketbook. Others should not threaten my home, food, utilities, finances, etc. What are the fears associated with that? Fears of being homeless, abandoned, going hungry, not being able to pay my bills. Notice the repeated fears. This will be again explained on another page with the fear inventories.
So now I'm looking at the 4th column, still writing, praying, or writing over on the top. God, please let me see the truth. Now I'm looking at me. I'm looking and finding my patterns, my defects of characters, my shortcomings. And the 4th column is the realization, did I repeat or develop the same behaviors that I resented in column 2 And did I do them to the person I listed in column 1 or anyone else? And that comes directly off of page 66. Where had I been self-seeking? I acted out to get my own way. I put unreasonable demands on my father, mother, and other family members. I knew emotional drama would always get me attention. I blamed you for my problems. Where had I been selfish? I didn't care what others had to do to sacrifice to please me. I constantly demanded attention. When I didn't get the attention, I accused others of not loving me. Where had I been dishonest? I would always tell lies. I would steal things. If I got in trouble, I would blame others. I had been so dishonest for so long, I couldn't see what the real truth was. The biggest tragedy is that now I see I was lying to myself.
And the fourth column worksheet continued. Here again, looking at my own defects of character. The realization, did I repeat and develop the same behaviors that I resented in column 2 to the person I've listed in column 1? Where had I been afraid? I was afraid of being caught in my lies. I was afraid that I wouldn't be loved because of my lies. I was afraid that I would always be alone and not wanted by anyone. The above fears drive the delusions that result in the attitudes behind the actions. Consider if there are any fears that should be on the list. Consider the opposite of each fear if it applies and add it to the list. Sometimes, there, as well as negative fear, sometimes there's healthy fear as well. I mean, I see a rattlesnake scurrying across my front yard. That's a healthy fear. I know not to go mess with that snake. I know to let him go out in the woods and do his thing, rather than go mess with him. So I had a fear of abandonment, or a fear of staying in a toxic relationship, fear of being alone, or filling my life with the wrong people, fear of too many people in my life, or fear of possibly being invisible to others, fear of staying in a bad relationship, or fear of not being financially stable enough to stay on my own. What would happen in those fears? I would stay in sick relationships as a result of that.
And while those red ors in there kind of indicate one or the other, it could be both. But that word or there is just a way to distinguish I'm looking at both sides of it. I'm afraid of the abandonment, but I'm also afraid of staying. Might be both, might be either or. But the or doesn't mean you've got to choose one or the other. It's just a way to separate that the two fears are there, they're related. They both may apply, neither may apply. We've got to look at those individually. And now the trail of fears. And remember I said we're going to list all the fears that we found in that first column. So going all the way back to the third column where I started writing the fears down as I was looking at the self-esteem and the pride and the ambition. All those fears I listed in that right-hand column, I'm now listing in this first column. The fear of not being good enough, the fear of being alone, the fear of abandonment, anger, violence towards me, going hungry. There's so many fears, can't count how many different types of fears that each one of us individually would have in any given situation. So we've got to come up and recognize what our own fears are. But once I've taken all of those fears, and in this case I have 2 pages of fears, which overall one column isn't that many, but we also, remember, took out anything that we had duplicated. Once I filled in that first column top to bottom, just like with the resentments, then I'm going to start working across. So I fear being not good enough. Why do I have this fear? Because I fear I'll be unwanted. This comes from the example that we did a couple of pages ago. I fear being unwanted. What's the fear behind that? Because I fear being alone. I don't want to be alone. I'm afraid of being alone. It's uncomfortable. What's the fear behind being alone? The fear of being in that emotional pain. What's the fear of being in that emotional pain? The fact that I'm going to sit there and I'm going to get stuck. What's the fear of sitting in that emotional pain? It's the fear that I'm going to pick up and I'm going to drink again, because I won't know what else to do with that pain that I'm in. What's the fear behind drinking? I'm either going to die or I'm going to go insane. And what's the fear of that? It's the fear of the unknown. And the fear behind the unknown is the fact that I'm afraid there is no God. And that brings me right back to that self-reliance. So I can't really go any further with that. Not just because I'm at the end of the page, but that's kind of like the big fear that I have in my life. There is no God. What am I trusting in? If I'm living in self-reliance, I'm not trusting in God. I'm not feeling like there is a God. And I have to find a way to bring that relationship with my God back. So then I drop down to the next row, the fear of being alone. But I have put 2 red X's there. The red X's just simply mean stop. Because in the 3rd column in the 1st row, I've already had being alone as one of my fears. And I followed that all the way through the end. So the red X's just say, I've done this one already. I don't have to do it again. Dropping down one more line, the fear of abandonment. The fear of abandonment brings me to the fear of being alone. And again, the 3rd time the fear of being alone comes up. This might be a pattern when I go back, when I'm doing my 5th step with my sponsor. This is a pattern in my fears that I can talk to my sponsor about. Next line down, the fear of anger. Why do I have the fear of anger? Because it's an unpredictable emotion. Why do I fear the unpredictable emotion? Because I don't know what I'm capable of when I'm in that state, when I'm just so angry that I don't know what I'm going to do. What's the fear behind not knowing what I'm capable of? That emotional pain that I'm going to put myself in. And I can put the red X's there because that emotional pain is in that top row. Dropping down one more row, the fear of violence towards me. Why do I have this fear of being hurt? I don't want to be hurt. It gives me physical pain. It gives me emotional pain. It gives me a whole lot of different types of pain. But the main fear behind being hurt is that emotional pain. What did I do to cause this? What did I see in him to begin with? Why am I still here? And if I sit in that emotional pain, where's it going to lead me? Back up to that top row. So I can put those X's in. So now I'm on my 5th row in my fears. I've already found 3 come up 3 times. I'm seeing a pattern in my fears. And then I'm going to continue going all the way down. Each one of those fears that I've come up, that I've recognized in my inventory work so far, I'm just going to follow each one through to say where they lead me. And most of the time, personally for me, I find my fear is usually totally unfounded, or because I am living in that self-reliance and I'm not inviting God into that part of my life. And it all boils down like the red letters at the bottom. Has self-reliance failed me? When I'm living in fear, I'm living in self.
So, to the sex inventory of the real live working resentment, here again, we're asking God to help us see the truth about my conduct in relationships. And here we write a brief history of the relationships and our motives for getting involved in it. We don't have to write a 585-page novel on this. My motives for getting involved were, he or she sure was cute, he or she sure was friendly, his or her smile sucked me in and made me melt. Maybe if we were in the lifestyle of drinking and using, maybe that was part of it, and that was part of the attraction as well. My specific conduct in the relationship, my specific conduct was totally self-seeking so that I could feel better about myself. Others commented on how cute my boyfriend or girlfriend was. Or maybe in my case, mine was always centered around sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's just the truth about me.
And I want to throw something in real quick. I was talking with somebody the other day who, when we're working on that third column in the 7 areas of self, we're looking at the sexual relationships. But again, not in that case the act of sex, but how we expect real men and real women to act in my life in that particular situation. But she was getting confused between that and this part of the sex inventory and trying to make the two of them fit together. So this part has nothing to do with that part. And the sex relations in the 7 areas of self don't necessarily have to be apart. There may be a relationship. They may be connected, but they're not part of the same inventory. It's 2 different inventories. One's the third column based on our resentments, and the sex inventory is based just on our resentment or on our relationship list, not off of our resentments. So moving on. The major points that came up in the relationship were, I don't play well with others. I always want my own way, and it's always or usually sexually motivated. I want control in every situation, whether it's sexual or not. I would do whatever it took to keep you from leaving me. We would fight over spending time with my family at the holidays. Religion and politics would always lead to more fighting, and in some cases, more beatings. How did it end, or how is it now? I walked away in anger because you didn't do what I wanted. Or, I acted out in such a way so you would leave. That way I wasn't the bad one in leaving. The relationship on both of our parts was so sick and toxic that leaving was a means of survival. But if I could act in a way that I made you to leave, then I could pull others into this drama, innocent bystanders, who would all come up to me and rally around me. Oh, you poor thing, he left, how dare he? It's his loss. But, isn't that just dragging other people into my drama when it was my behavior that caused it to begin with? And then a footnote at the bottom. After the process of taking the steps and making amends, some of these relationships have healed and have become healthy friendships. But the important part is that I've taken a look at and taken responsibility for my own part.
And again, continued with this, and as always, we're asking God to help us see the truth here. Look at each relationship and answer these 9 questions, which the reference is page 69 in our big book. Where had I been selfish, concerned with myself only? I wanted sex all of the time. Or I never wanted sex. I was demanding. When I didn't want sex, I'd push you away or reject you. I demanded unhealthy or unreasonable sex. Where had I been dishonest, deceptive, or fraudulent? I said you were the only one, but you weren't. I said I was going to work early, but I stopped by to see my girlfriend first. Where had I been inconsiderate, disregard for others? I did not consider your feelings. I did not consider your plans when I decided to stay late at work and again went to see my girlfriend.
Question number 4, whom did I hurt? And I need to look around the entire relationship. I hurt my spouse. I hurt our children. I hurt my girlfriend's or my boyfriend's children. I hurt extended family members. I hurt relationships at work when they caught me in my lies. How did I arouse jealousy? I constantly flirted with others in front of my spouse. I flirted with my friends' spouses in front of them. How did I arouse suspicions? How did I make you doubt my honesty? I lied about where I was going to be and when I would be home. I would constantly take phone calls and texts when I was home, and I wouldn't let you see who they were from, or I'd leave the room to respond. I would call you from her house with her parrot squawking in the background, but I couldn't figure out how you knew I was there. How did I arouse bitterness and deep resentment? I would leave our family gatherings to see her family instead. I paid her rent and neglected our family. I lashed out in anger, always defensive. But she needs me! And where was I at fault? I would put my family and our family second to her family and their needs.
What should I have done instead? In the relationship, don't write, not gotten involved in the first place. Make sure you are especially explicit about question number 9. You will refer back to this list for writing your sex ideal, reference page 69. Here's what I should have done. I should have put my family first. Should have been honorable and faithful, financially and emotionally supportive to my family. I should have been kind, loving, and tolerant. I should have taken care of others' needs before mine. I should have prayed and asked for God's help. Harm. Write any specific harm that comes to you while writing. The realization that I caused deep emotional wounds in my family that could never be repaired. Many of the things I did could be considered abusive or narcissistic. In my experience, I have caused unknown and sometimes irreversible damage to others' lives. I want to touch on that for just a second. In my first marriage, I can remember being drunk, and my daughter and I were separated for 32 years, and she just turned 48 years old. She's been back in my life for about 15 years, and she carries a scar on her from when I broke a window in a door. And that scar that she carries is enough to keep her in emotional pain from my actions when I was drunk, through my own behaviors back then. To the best of my ability, I have tried to make amends, but that really comes down to between her and God. However, it is still an action that through this work I have learned how to become accountable for. A prayer. God, I ask you to help me mold what the ideal relationship should be in my life, that I may be able to live by that ideal and live in healthy relationships with others. Amen.
Now that we have followed the instructions and taken a look at ourselves and our conduct, let us now turn to page 69, paragraphs 3 and 4, and refer to the instructions in finding our sexual ideal. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and to help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it.
There are 12 steps and 12 traditions for recovery. There are 11 chapters in our book. Is it possible that chapter 12 in your big book will be your story? So how will it read? Finding yourself through this inventory could be the beginning of your chapter 12. It is now up to you to write your story.
And a fifth step note. The bottom of page 74 to the top of page 75 gives us the directions of how to choose who is to hear our fifth step. Its suggestion is that we choose someone who will keep our confidentiality. This could be a priest, minister, or rabbi, or a counselor, people who are bound by confidentiality by law. However, experience has taught us of the value of taking this step with another alcoholic, sponsorship. We believe that the advantage to this is that the experience of another alcoholic knows where to direct us through the process of recovery. We recommend that you prayerfully ask God to bring the right person into our lives to help us through this process.
We hope that you will continue to join us in our bi-monthly workshop, as this work is only a beginning into the truth about ourselves. It is our experience that when people return month after month with new questions, we all grow in effectiveness and understanding. We continue to ask God to mold us into the people He would have us be, so that we can help others find their truth. Yours in service with love, LPPBBSG. And thank you so much, folks. And now we are open for any questions that any of you might have. I see that several of you have put your emails into the chat, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have on any of the slides or anything. So please feel free to unmute and ask away.
And just a reminder, we do record this for our podcast and now also for our YouTube channel. So we will leave the recording going for a little while, but if you'd rather ask a question off recording, let us know in chat so that we don't close out and not take those questions as well. And that said, does anybody want to jump in with any questions or comments? I will go ahead and turn off the recording.